Good evening, everybody. My name is Ayan, and I'm from the Singapore Art Museum, also known as Sam. Welcome to A Date with Sam, a talk as part of Art in the Commons, Data Visualizing Jurong, where we have the artist debuting joining us today. And the session will also be moderated by Kenneth Tay. This program is in collaboration with Nanyang Polytechnic, supported by Tote Board with our venue partner, Science Center. Before we begin with the talk, just a short introduction about the exhibition. Art in the Commons Data Visualizing Jurong is a series of community-based participatory art programs to uncover community interests within the Jurong district. In the artwork, Data Mining Jurong, debuting sketches out an alternate reality where Jurong's past encounters its present to reflect on what Jurong is, what Jurong was, and what it might become. For those of you who did not manage to catch the exhibition at Science Center Singapore, here are some photographs of the exhibition. It is still ongoing until 30th of January 2021 if you would still like to catch it. So without further ado, I'll hand over the time to our speakers for today, Debbie Ding, a visual artist, technologist, and lecturer, the amazing artist behind the artwork, as well as Kenneth Tay, our curator at SAM. Take it away, Debbie and Kenneth.
So hi everybody, thanks for coming to the talk. I thought that we would start this talk by bringing the people to the work itself. So, but of course this is, I have a little view of my studio. This is actually my living room. My living room, you can see this is my bookshelf, my living room and my kitchen. You can even go here. I have a number of little worlds already put up in the background for you to see. This is my void deck, that's the street outside my house. And of course, most importantly, we want to bring you to see the tour of the work itself. This is actually the walkthrough. The work is not a walking work, but this version of it is the walking version, so that we can take you through the tunnel, the tunnel of where we have all these objects here. We have that you can see in the work itself. This is the work itself, except that I made a walking version. I'm going to walk you through it. So when you come to see the work, you get to descend this tunnel. But for the purpose of this talk, thought you can just walk through with us the different parts of this tunnel. You can look around. You can see that it is a tunnel. We have the bricks from Jurong, and we also have some books and astronaut ice cream. Astronaut ice cream, everyone always remembers I also remember astronaut's ice cream. MRT, train. There are a lot of plants. A lot of people like plants in Jurong. The sanitizer bottle, also a thing, a pickaxe, mining. This is the 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 video game. It's an item that's also at the Science Center, not on show, but it is in the time capsule inside
just
there, outside in Jurong. It was actually one of the items as well that was, I think we were doing this project, I found out that this CD of this video game was made by what's the department? The department I'm in, actually, the School of Design and Media, in its earlier incarnation, had made this, and some of the colleagues that I work with also, I can work on this, maybe 20 years ago, very long,
years ago, right?
Very long,
I think about that.
So really long time ago, when they were very young, So there are other artifacts. So I thought we should at least look through this, because sometimes we start artist talk and people actually haven't seen it yet, and maybe they're planning to see it, but they haven't seen it. So you can see this tunnel experience, and we're gonna maybe maybe we will start after this to talk about how this project began.
Yeah. But yeah, it was great that we are starting basically a walkthrough version of what is essentially a video installation if you come by to the Science Center. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention that, first of all, good evening everyone and Happy New Year. Yeah, so thanks for joining us today. Maybe, once we now that we've gone through the walkthrough version of the work, maybe we can start a little bit by introducing a bit of your practice to everyone, so that everyone understands Debbie on top. And prior to coming to this project, maybe we could begin, I suppose, with here the River Lies.
Yes. So I guess how I ended up making art is that actually I didn't really study art. I never really studied art, but what I studied at university was literature, which I think is pretty close. I think a lot of the works I made start as pieces of writing, and I have to translate them into a visual form. And I suppose that's the challenge. That's also the thing. Translating things into a visual form is something that I'm in design that I'm also interested in. I think I often say that I use the skills from design to produce, maybe the kind of technology or design skills in order to produce art. And I guess that's one way to approach it, because I think I currently I kind of play the role of a design educator and also an artist at the same time. So maybe to talk about Here the River Lies. So I guess a lot of it is kind of came from my interest in maps. This is actually an anecdote that this is a little story about many years ago when there was this website, 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 I think it was the main thing people used at one time. And what happened is that I was reading this case, I was following this case, there was a court case about how the Singapore Land Authority was suing 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 for stealing their maps, and how they had done it, how they had actually proven in the court of law, how they proved that their map had been stolen is that they purposely drew all the things in the wrong way. So there were items such as the fort gate, which the Singapore Land Authority had drawn in a really, you go there, it doesn't look like this, but they had been copied by the 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 exactly wholesale. They also included some fake buildings, fake things inside there, road names that were intentionally spelled wrongly. They looked at even how there were some idiosyncratic ways of writing, like HDB block names, and they were all in a, because whoever typed it in that day, it just happened to be in that format. So they used all this as evidence, the fact that the map had been made imperfectly or had these wrong elements as the fingerprint that proved the ownership of the map. And I guess I think back in 2010 there was this there used to be this box by the Singapore River. There was this blue box, and I think I always walked past this box. It used to be outside Maybank, and it's like naturally a kind of signboard that you would imagine, like where you have a screen, a touch screen or something, but instead it had a small gap and people were stuffing the rubbish inside it. There was no map, no information about the Singapore River. So at that point, I worked in the CBD in design, and I guess I walked around the whole area. And the river was a kind of navigation point for me. And then I realized that my colleagues did not know where the Singapore River really was. Where were we? Where is anything? It's such a small place, Singapore, and yet there's sometimes very little we know of it. I think I had that experience also because in London, everybody is aware where you are in relation to the river. You know where the River Thames is. You've seen it in the
people navigate in relation to the river, right?
Yes, so you know where you are in relation to the river. You know the shape of it because it appears in everything. And something like the Singapore River didn't seem to be very known, and that kind of I guess that was one of the many reasons why I wanted to make something about the river at that point. And let me make it bigger. This is the map that I ended up drawing of the river. The map itself is about I think 3 meters long. 3 meters long, and I wanted to use that as a map on which people could put their stories about the Singapore River. And the stories didn't have to be, this is not a kind of a historical project, or this is not a kind of project where everything has to be like confirmed to be true, then you put it on. I wanted to be maybe somewhere to collect these stories that could be wrong or bad as well. Or bad not because they were unhappy only, but because maybe you don't know how to prove it. You know, so there were all these different kind of different stories. In the end, I think I collected about 1,700 distinct, unique stories. This is actually the sheet you can see in the background. All the back, all the
stories that you've collected. Right?
Yeah, some of them being very mundane, of course. Some of them being out of point also, and some interesting ones where you know it's kind of interesting because you see people trying to come up with something, you know, or you know, or they've written something that is or poetic or
I remember some people actually drawing on it, right? There were drawings and diagrams that were submitted as part of it. Yes,
there are some that are, I also noted in my spreadsheet that are not in English, and there are some that have drawing on it. I think although you know, obviously now you're seeing it as a spreadsheet, as a data in a digital form. I did collect it as handwritten entries actually, because I felt like I wanted to get that drawing. You know, I wanted to get people's visual interpretations of it, if possible. Not that, well, I think it was quite mixed, you know, 1,700 is a lot to go through as well, you know, but I guess you know, at that time I thought I would collect it by hand because when people are asked to write it, it might have a different thing from, you know, here's a survey, you know, it sometimes can feel that different. Or you really have to make sure that the audience the person writing it is going to write the story. Or maybe the questions or so. No, this is very, very simple. I think around that time, there was also a lot of Singapore memory projects, I think the year after I made this work. And a lot of them were super earnest, right? They were very kind of like, they represented a side of that was, everything had to be, you know, true, and everything had to be correct and verifiable with evidence, you know, but what about the kind of mythology or the space for a story that is half remembered, you know, or a fantasy even. So
but in a way, if we go back to the earlier point when you mentioned about the SLA and street directory, right, or virtual maps, I think as the company was called, the whole dispute or the whole argument between them was was really because SLA had included some fake elements like temples and whatnot, right? As part of their signature, so that they know that this map is theirs. So there were already falsities within that map. And so when street directory lifted, I guess, used their maps, they could tell, right? Because there were these like odd data within the map itself. So in a way, I always thought of Here the River Lies precisely as a response, not to provide necessarily an accurate mapping of the river, but really also as a kind of response that deals with the public's own memory, which may or may not be correct. But nonetheless holds significance to this group of people, right? And so the project really, for me, what was interesting about it is the collection of public memories, regardless of their veracity. But also, of course, then it's funnily backgrounded by the fact that SLA itself had added all these weird things and weird data onto it.
I think you're absolutely right. The thing about when I first showed it in the beginning, when there were only like I think 200 cards, it was kind of a setting where people would come back and see if their memory was there. I made that, you know, I wrote that. It was still possible to do that. Obviously, now with 1,700, it was very hard to find it. Plus, there's no space for all
to present all
in one go. But you know, exactly that people would come back to examine if their story was there, what other stories were near theirs, you know, and you know that it would become their map because they had put the story on it.
And so these are the way that it's often presented, right?
So these are you can see some of the pictures here in the background. You've got the cards that are on the map. The stories can be seen there, and also this is it shown in different settings, different places. This was actually the Singapore Art Museum, I think in 2014. No,
I think 2013.
2013. Sometime back. You know, it was and I think also because it was not at the Singapore River, sometimes there were a few people that wrote River Safari, you know, something like that as well, you know, all these kind of things that were, or, you know, other than it. But, you know, it's somewhere where at least is a net for us to catch all these stories as well.
Yeah. It's also interesting that you restaged this work a couple of times, right? Not just as a way to collect data from the public, but most recently, I think earlier in April last year, right? Sam represented this in one of our show, 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘀. And part of the interesting points in discussion about this work was that, how this map this work not only functions as a collection of public memories, but how do you even map Singapore to begin with in a place that constantly changes, right?
Yes.
And then maps constantly have to update themselves. So that was part of it. Oh yes.
So this is actually the virtual set. We returned to the virtual set of the 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 show. Well, it's only one corner of the
the show itself,
the basement gallery, where the map was here. It was shown. This is actually what it looked like in the show, right?
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
Except I made the TV bigger because I can make big TVs bigger without paying for a bigger TV in the virtual world. But the cards were also displayed. It's a big gallery of them. On both sides.
There's a whole vitrine of that.
There's a whole vitrine of them. All the cards are there. And it's shown on a big map as well. Yeah.
Coming back to it, I think why I wanted to for us to begin with here, right, the River Lies, was really to talk about the project itself really as a collection of qualitative data, I guess, if some people want to call it that. But itself, when we think about data visualization itself, we tend to think in the quantitative fashion, right? Like if you do a quick Google search as this background, you see, like most of it is statistical, most of it is numerative, and on the quantitative side. And they tend often today, when we say mouth off the word data viz, right? We tend to assume that it's tied to a certain scale of data crunching. Right? Of course, enabled by computers today.
With that picture of that cabin, this is actually another picture that I happened to take around that time as well. This is actually my daughter and my mom. We playground, but the cabin, this picture of this cabin, which I ended up, trying to visualize a bit like this. That you imagine this set piece, where that represented both our realities, the real cabin and another completely different alternate reality itself. And maybe I'll talk a bit about the data as well that we tried to collect. So we did the students came up with a number of questions to ask the public, and we collected. This is actually kind of what it looks like. It's a bit small. I don't think I can zoom in here, but also already, so there were lots of textual data, and it wasn't very easy to sum up what it was. The questions that the students had designed for it were kind of questions like, what are the three words you would associate with? What are the companies you would associate? What kind of sound? What kind of sound do you think you would associate with it? And the kind of objects as well, objects that were of interest, that we could try to.
I think there was a question about color also, right? What is the color of Jurong, for instance?
What color it is. It's completely across the spectrum. If I'll get out of the way here to see it. A lot of red, I don't know why. A lot of red, and also gray, because Jurong, the school color is gray or something, right? I was
going to say maybe the industrial smog, but I might be wrong.
And the smells, unfortunately, the smells are not represented in the work because I was told there was a Cadbury factory, and there was also various interesting smells from the factory, burning smells wafting over, So these are the kind of, so from all this data, we try to sort out what are the objects that would be interesting, that would go into the final work to be translated in. And it's not like we, wanted to, it's something where you would search for it also as you descend down the tunnel. So here's some of the pictures of it. Is what it looked like.
And this was essentially based off the data that was collected, right, from residents in Jurong.
So the objects is now highlighted. Now two of the objects I put here, and we also included, which I didn't show actually, is I also looked at the data that was from the Science Center on their time capsule. A number of objects came from their time capsules that were over, I think since 73, there were a lot of different times where they put more objects in as well. And they were all donated by different organizations. This one was donated by NYP in 2001. Which means that it is
It's 21
years.
old.
21 years. Oh my goodness. Maybe some of my students, if you're here, is it even older than?
Well, 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 is definitely older.
Oh my goodness. 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 is ancient now. Yeah. If he wasn't ancient then, he's now ancient, even more ancient now. Yeah. So, you know, these are the kind of objects, you know, that I mean, now even this game, I don't know how to play. Even if I bought it on Carousel or something, right?
Yeah.
or dug up a copy from
Today
somewhere.
is the day you recognize that 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 is a boomer.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just go on to show you some more pictures of the behind the scenes of how it looked like. So I think you know, when we were thinking of constructing the cabin, you know, we thought the students would make it as a series of donuts, you know, to make a cabin shape. We can just see here. So and it was kind of pieced together, you know, with different particles. This was added. The particle effect was added by students as well, and the objects also. Some of them were modeled by them, some of them were also modeled by myself. So what you see there is actually is done in Unity. So the students also coded the thing together to make it loop seamlessly, you know, like an infinite tunnel. So what you can see here is actually the behind the scenes, our editing view, what it looks like. And I think this is another way to view it. So when you
go through the tunnel.
When you go through the tunnel, if you look around also, you can look around. Yeah, but of course I think when you go to see the work, it's not like just playing a computer game. We wanted it to be something where it felt really immersive because it's projected on a big floor. If you stand on the edge of it, it's like you're being pulled into it. And the particles are also bringing you into it. The particles that are floating in and out of this space are also bringing you there.
And there's two perspectives given, right? One is as you tunnel through down, and then one is almost a kind of side view as you descend down the shaft.
Yeah. So I thought I'd also share a few images because I think when I was trying to think of how it looked like, this is the early sketch I think I sent over in the very early stage. And then for me, I think I use a lot of 3D modeling to, even when I'm not doing a 3D modeling thing, I'm doing a drawing, right? I think 3D modeling helps me visualize it. So it's something I use a lot of Blender to visualize it. You know, so even at the early stages, I think I kind of already know what maybe a work might look like. Yeah, and it can be done, you know, I can by being able to model it out, you can get a sense of what it's going to be. Yeah, I think a lot of it is also, you know, like in design, we are, I think probably also because of my background and having studied in a speculative design program at RCA, you know, a lot of it is also thinking of plucking an object out from another world, you know, from our timeline and plonking it down in front of you. So sometimes you don't have to deal with the what ifs, the kind of prospective futures, or even don't talk about the history because that is not right in front of you, so you don't have to deal with it or even process it. But if it's brought into your world, then you have to engage with it. You have to, if the physical thing is there, and I think that's maybe the thing I like also from it, you know, the idea of bringing an object or bringing a perspective, you know, over from another timeline.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, you know, to put it in different words, you might say that I think there's a tendency for us to think that anything speculative is just, you know, very, very spacey kind of imaginations. But essentially what we're arguing also is that speculations are always generative because you have that thing now in front of you, right? And then you now have to engage with it, right? Otherwise, it's really just in your own private head. Right? And so speculations also have that social dimension to them, which is they're meant to be generative.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think also sometimes even when I talk about speculative design, I know sometimes the question is whether is there room for that discussion? Is there space for you to talk about it? I think even like why I always value doing these kind of talks is also because it's not just about making a work or something, it's also about what is around it also. Whether people go to see it, whether they talk about it, whether, you know, whether from something there is a chance to speak about something. So this is another picture of the work. So from here, it kind of looks
more or less,
right? More or less, yeah. And
with a nice halo around the work.
Yeah. So these are some more shots from it. I think you can go and see it for yourself until
the end of this month.
End of this month at the Science Center. So you can see it for yourself. It's much more fun sit down there and see it for yourself, I think, than me just showing you the slides here.
Yeah. There's also the sort of sculptural, the 3D sculptural piece.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah,
the caverns, yeah. And also shout out to any of our students, IB students who are here as well in this talk. No, because of this work also wouldn't be possible without their work, all their hard work on it.
Maybe I can also maybe round things up by also talking about the venue itself, because we essentially are hosting it within an exhibition called Urban Mutations, which is an exhibition organized by the Science Center within their premise, of course, looking at, I guess, urban developments around major cities in the world, Singapore being one, of course, compared to Tokyo, London, New York, Rio de Janeiro as well. So then within that exhibition, you'll find Debbie's work in the corner. But also we wanted this work to not just think about Singapore, but specifically about the neighborhood, Jurong itself, in which the Science Center is located. I think most people have memories, I hope, of visiting Jurong via, the Science Center, among many other things. But few people actually know a little bit about the Science Center's history within Jurong itself. Was that the idea itself was already established sometime in the 50s for a science center, sort of museum that would showcase science and tech, as well as some natural history of Singapore. And then, but it only really became a reality in 1977 when it opened in Jurong. It was really meant to be an educational hub to educate students, incoming students, about science and tech, as well as what is happening in Singapore in that cluster, and hopefully to inspire students to join that sector, right? At a time when Singapore was trying to rapidly develop its economy beyond just a kind of simple manufacturing, right? So really, Science Center is at once a kind of educational hub, but also trying to generate certain futures for Singapore. At the same time, it was a kind of reflection on Jurong itself, right? Being that first economic experiment that was administered by 𝘋𝘢𝘵, right? Which many people thought was going to fail. But now Jurong has clearly become quite a interesting model for a lot of people. It's even in the name Suburban Jurong, Jurong Town, JTC, for instance, which goes around cities around the world to provide urban expertise consulting. So Jurong has kind of become this kind of showpiece, I would say. And today, of course, it's being designated as the second CBD with its own cluster of data centers, mixed use developments, as well as, for a long time, we all thought it was coming, the high-speed rail that will connect us to across, a different economy. So Jurong was supposed to be that, and so what is that future for Jurong, at this juncture? And this project was really us trying to take a, what would you call it, a snapshot? I don't know if it's a snapshot, but a kind of reading, I guess, of the room in Jurong, right? Like what residents were thinking about Jurong at this time, where it seems to be in the midst of a transition, right, towards a future Jurong. Right.
Like it capture a snapshot in the moment, a bit like that time capsule.
It actually comes back to the time capsule itself. But also trying to generate a certain future for it, I guess, right? Whether or not oil is native habitats. How are we doing for time? I don't know if we should be taking questions at this point, right?
I think we have to take, maybe we should do a Q&A, right?
I would leave maybe that to Ayin in terms of whether we want to take any questions or...
Yes.
I hope that you have enjoyed the sharing. Please use the Q&A function. If you do have any questions, you can type them in as well. So,
in the meantime, while we wait for some questions to come, I could also maybe talk a little bit about the process itself, because I think when we wanted to think about data mining, when we set about with those questionnaires, right? It was also a question of in the time of the pandemic, right? How do you really want to reach these people without necessarily endangering, anyone, and so we had a difficult time, I think. trying to strike a balance between trying to get enough information from people, but then also not putting your own students
or
in
putting
danger.
the respondents themselves
exactly. Respondents
I think we began talking about this much earlier, like was it very early last year? Maybe even the beginning, or
I think sometime in the middle of the year last year, right after 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢. Maybe.
No, I think
Even
we start talking about that.
Oh man, I've lost track of time.
I think it was before that actually that we talked about it, and I was trying to figure out, how we can bring students in on it as well. And it's I think we would have wanted to do in person, a focus group. It would have been like what we do almost in UX design. Where you go and speak to people and say, how do you like it? What is your opinion? Or how will you find this button? And that would be the best way in person. But of course, in the end, it is what we did is the students design the questions, and then we send the questions out.
Do you think that how was the experience of trying to get design students to think beyond the usual kind of discipline?
I think the only thing is I feel like some part of this is also due to the maybe education system where where a lot of times maybe there isn't a very much room in Singapore's education for people to be complete, to be creative in that way, that everything has to serve a function or a purpose, like but what's the point of the project? What is that can be quite hard, because sometimes you want to leave that room for that kind of experimentation. And I think for me, in some points in my career as an artist, right, I found those kind of spaces like places like the substation that really allow for that kind of like, it's okay to be raw and not really
we didn't even talk about
shiny.
your substation project, but
I forgot. I should have said Here the River Lies began at the substation. The reason that exists is because of the substation open call in 2010. It's funny because before that point, I had only worked with them as a designer and as a musician, and we got doing all their graphic design and whatnot, and organizing gigs, And then I said, hey, I want to make this, and they were like, all right, we'll take a chance on that. I was like, okay, they let me build a touch table map of Singapore River, where you could you touch it and it would go from the historical shape where it's like full of curves to a kind of speculative flat line, because that's what it seemed to be doing anyway. So that I was making that, and they let me make it. Although I was a lit grad proposing to make an interactive table from scratch, to code it on my own. And put all the equipment together on my own, and so they really took a chance on that. But at least it happened, and I think for me that also helped me transition from only doing my. I felt very more confident in doing that kind of work as well, because of those opportunities. It didn't have to be like a blockbuster show, where I think we have the expectations when in Singapore that everything has to be the finished product already. You can't show the unfinished thing. You can't leave it raw, raw edges and everything.
There's a tendency to treat art and its presentations as if you're shopping for branded bags, right? You want the prettiest, or you want the most glamorous and the finished thing.
We do have a question from
Moon
In. Debbie, could you revisit the distinction between art and design? What is your definition of both and their interconnections? Is it a productive distinction, or should we abolish it? Yep, she said she may have missed part of what you said about it. Thanks, Moon In, for your question. Debbie?
Yes, this is a hard question. Define art. Define art. Can I define art?
You're on your own for this one.
Yeah, or define design. Okay. But for me, I think in Singapore, I see the distinction drawn very hard at times. Also because, how do I say this? Obviously, how a project is funded sometimes is the line is drawn. The design project is the design side. Art project is the other side. And so that's one, how the money comes about, obviously draws that distinction of how people define it. For me, I think that the skills or the kind of things that people use are very similar, but maybe the approaches, the words and the language are totally different also. I think as as the educator in this case, I realized that I realized the vocabulary was difficult for me to explain to the students, my design students out of nowhere, my interaction design students out of nowhere. I'm saying that now we want to talk about these things. So I realized that when I was working with the first group of students, I found that I knew they had difficulty explaining why are we doing it this way? Why are we talking about it this way? When in design we might do a design sprint, and then it's going to be like, going to understand, going to define. We got all these words for it that we use a certain language to define all these stages of thinking. And in art, we might use different concepts, or even the word we choose is really important, how we translate it, or we, facilitate it, or whatever. All these words that you choose matter in your interpretation of the work. And I think sometimes in design, we use a totally different set of language. Yeah. So I think you can even say that I feel it's that you can even say that they can both do the same thing, but and people might be, their practices as artists or practice as a designer could look almost the same thing, that you could be producing the same kind of work. Today, at least in the expanded understanding of what art and design is,
But then also I remembered one time where we had this casual conversation. You mentioned, the work of 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢, right? As so-called speculative designer. And to you almost feel like their work veers towards art, but they just choose not to call it that.
I think for them, I believe they would consider that they would question whether art has that transformative power, that revolutionary power, and they think that design would have it. But of course, that design for them is defined as something that they are defining it as well as something that can change the world, that they are able to, that the function is to change the world. And to change people's minds about the world, to expand our understanding of it. And in that way, for me also, it's a bit like, maybe the works be situated in the design museum, which is also like art museum, but it's a design museum. Yeah,
definitely as such. I hope we answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, the simplified way I would say is that that I always talk about this gap in the understanding, where design would be like, we're trying to say that I'm going to be able to tell you exactly what it is. And then in art, you see that the gap is something you can never resolve. That there is always a gap between the form and maybe the form, what you see and what it actually is. And it's going to be, we are always struggling to find that translation. That this translation will not be perfect. Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay for it to be like that.
Transitioning to what you mentioned about it's okay to be struggling like that, we had a question by an anonymous attendee. What were the challenges or struggles that you faced when organizing this project? Besides the conceptual
I think
part?
this is to me, right? Not to me.
One is, I think the main one is that it was during COVID, and that maybe some ways of how we were conducting the project had to be changed quite a lot. If I could, if maybe it would have been a very different way, how students would have spoken to the public, it might have turned out differently. Because I think there were a lot of limitations in that aspect. The other challenge for me, is maybe the other big challenge I had was, I think I would just say it's the language, like I said. That language is such a big part of this project. Like I said, in design, there are very functional ways of doing it, and to make students understand that why we, I was trying to give them readings, even the second group students that I worked with. I remember I tried to give them some readings about space, about walking, about psychogeography, so that they could understand some of this also, and take that also in how they wrote about it, to find a poetic way to say it, instead of I think we in design you just want to go straight to the point, or you just got to communicate with the client and reason it out until and sometimes that poetry is lost. And for me also, that's where it is in poetry and literature, where there's so much like art. It is we know it's a drawing is not to be perfect. A sketch is, the value is not that it is a photorealistic sketch, that you get. The thing is that when you see it, someone drew it, and that a human interpreted this way. It's like when they, what was it, what was the city book? There was when people draw a hand-drawn map of a place, there are all these distortions of where they thought, oh, this is really short. But then you draw, when you draw, you realize that that for them, maybe the world was like this, and that's something you couldn't really tell if you were like, all right, we just call it Google Maps, this is the map now, this is the only map we use, Yeah.
Well, we have one more question.
We have a last question. Debbie and Kenneth, is there any advice you would like to give to students or people wanting to jumpstart their art or design careers?
I guess I can give advice on this. For me, when I started working in design, I had never studied art or design at that point, but I was really interested in it. I just spent a lot of time learning from the internet. That's the truth of it. And to today, I spend a lot of time learning. And even after I did my master's I did my grad school, they don't really teach you the design like that either. It's more about the maybe higher level concepts or thinking behind it that we talk about at something like in grad school. But I realized that I think in 2015, 2016, after I finished my master's, I realized that what I really wanted was to be able to control things, like be able to make things in 3D and to make it that way, make a game, make something in a different format, an interactive format that way. So I think I spent a number of years just teaching myself that, and then acquiring the skills for all those bits, like learn 3D modeling, learn Unity, learn how to do rigging, and I'll do all the bits myself, And I think a lot of it is that sometimes it doesn't, you don't know where it's leading, but for example, I apply it to a creative project that gives me a reason to try and make something. So I guess I don't even know sometimes where it's going to contribute to my job or my career, whatever, because just exploring and learning. And think of it as building a foundation for later. Because I think sometimes we are very functional. You're like, oh, it's not going to be tested, then don't want to do, And for me, it's that joy of learning actually. So that's how I would say, if you don't try it, also there's so many aspects to art and so many ways to do design, so many types of design. Maybe if you don't like UX design, maybe you like, I don't know, spatial design, interior design, product design, and so many other types of things. But you won't know till you try to format out, all these different worlds of ways of making, or fine art, make fine art, sculpture, painting, Sometimes we have never even tried that, So you don't know. So I would say, I guess this is like, making a wide portfolio. Because I think my first design job that I got, I had been working as a copywriter, not a designer, but I made a flash portfolio, Newgrounds, this probably no one will know what I'm saying.
I know what Newgrounds is.
Nobody will know what I'm saying, but Newgrounds last time.
Back in the days of Flash.
Back in the day, all the Flash stuff, all your before that, 𝘋𝘢𝘵𝘢 shockwave, all those kind of interactive things, making the buttons in a tiny square font or something, all those kind of things. I was making a lot of weird stuff, and some of that became part of my portfolio in the end, just making all these fun projects. So I would say having that room to explore, even if you're not actually sure how it is in the beginning, is useful, because with that kind of breadth of experience, you normally you can actually use that in your practice in the future. It's not going to be wasted. That's what I say.
I was just going to say, maybe as a quick last advice, I would think, I'm not an artist clearly, but I think that there's a way to think about things from a more, I guess, what was the word, poetic way, right? When we think about maybe design or something pedestrian, we, even in conversations with people, you can answer someone straight to the point in the terms of like, you say something and I said, okay, and that's the end of the conversation, right? But then what if you reply in memes, right? So in a way, memes to me are poetry. When you reply in memes, because you're participating in something that's social, but then it could mean something, but at the same time, it also means there's a sort of openness
Yeah.
when you reply in GIFs or you reply in memes, right?
Yeah.
And so that's already, you know, each of us has a certain kind of a poetic streak, I would imagine. So it's just about leaning into it.
Yeah.
Right, and playing around with it. Each of us are actually secretly a poet in the age of meme. Oh, actually, we have one final question. Can we take that?
Yes, okay, this is the final question for Debbie and Kenneth. From curating this kind of data and art, what do you think makes technology-based work very special?
Text-based work.
Technology-based.
I ask myself that question, whether I fetishize tech sometimes, you know, when we talk about what makes it special. I often would say that the technology, the reason why I use tech in my work is that it is a reflection of what I am in contact with and things around me in my life, because I never started with traditional media. So my reference point has always been interactive media, games, everything digital first. When I joined a filmmaking club, it was all digital. In NUS New Studios, the new studios, we just shot straight to digital, everything, you know, and you know, that was it. That was the so even every single thing I made was digital. So it just makes sense to make it that way. I don't know if that makes it special. Maybe that is up to the viewer or up to
I would answer it in a different way. I would think that if I look at the question again, this kind of data and art, I guess in a way you could argue that the data that we've collected, right, there was nothing inherent about it that it needed to be a form of interactive media or it needed to be in a website, right? You could have used paper, what we consider traditional media, but people tend to forget that paper itself is a technology. Right. I guess in that question, I would assume that when you say tech-based work, I guess you're referring much more to like digital and new media, right? I would say that for me, it's trying to avoid that, you know, overemphasis on technology, right? Because to me, everything is technology. Roads are technology to get from A to B, right? Compared to, let's say, walking, right? You now have a road that allows you to travel by car on it, right? So it's not to fetishize any sort of new or digitality, if you want to call it. Our fingers are digital. So it's more of like, I look at it in terms of what the project specifically could benefit from, rather than, you know, going out of the way to look for so-called tech work or machine art necessarily.
I think also one caution is that that we often think that tech must mean future, shiny, but when I work with things, I mean, I also try to remind my students a lot of time that a lot of it is very flawed. We have to roll with the comedic errors that occur with it, because that is inherent. We can't pretend like, oh, it's going to be all futuristic. Actually, when you code it, it's like, oh, I know, like, don't know what was happening, you know. So, but actually, so you have to have the humor about it to make good work as well, I think. Because the tech is not it's not going to solve everything, you know.
We have to kind of move away from a kind of technological solutionism, right? Like you know, tech will save the day. I mean, that's what some big tech companies believe. But I will just end my answer to the question by pointing to one particular book. I think it's called Dear Data, right? Where two designers essentially exchange letters between London and New York, and they do sort of data visualizations through analog means, right? And they were sending them through postcards to each other every day. And these were collected and into this book called Dear Data. I encourage anyone to look for it. It really tells you that, you know, even when you work with something like so-called data and you think about its aesthetics, it doesn't always have to take the form of some kind of screen media or computational tool to work with it. It's really, in fact,
maybe it's more interesting that it breaks away from that.
And that whole medium of exchange between the two designers living in two different places through the, you know, snail mail, essentially postcards, also adds a different dimension to the project. Right. So
Thank you so much, Debbie and Kenneth, for that wonderful talk. I hope everybody enjoy all their sharings. And with that, we end the session. Thank you everybody for joining and have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.